everyone. Welcome to our Real Estate Roundtable again. I'm here with Elizabeth and Jeri. Today we're going to be talking about a great podcast, Real Estate Insiders, hosted by Keith and James. Both are CEOs of NextHome. And I thought it was a great episode because it really talks about the new rules that have come out from the big lawsuit. And it was just a really spicy, I guess, podcast. I think he was there with Nick and who was it, Steve?
Oh, let me get their names right for you.
Yeah.
It was Nick Offenkamp and Steve Colino.
Yeah. And so I think how the whole thing started was James posted something, I want to say on LinkedIn, and then Steve and Nick came in the comments and they kind of had a little argument. It sounded like, I didn't actually read the comments, but I thought it was funny, and I was like, this is going to be a great podcast to listen to and maybe have a discussion with. So
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Anyways, what did you guys think about the episode?
Well, you want to start, Elizabeth?
Yeah, I liked it. I liked how respectful they were to each other.
Yeah.
Because they would, get into it a little bit and then say, well, I agree with you actually, but I'm being devil's advocate.
Yeah.
That's what I do, James.
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciate that. I loved all the data points that he had, all the timelines, data points.
Right. He's good at that.
Yeah, that's his thing. I like that because I'm a data person as well. And it was just nice to hear about different options in the real estate world, being transparent, and how important that is for the consumer. I definitely appreciated that part of it. What'd you think?
Definitely agree with all of that, ditto. And I also really enjoyed hearing from the two guests on their podcast about their different, shall we say, a la carte menu for real estate services. And there's a lot of play that we can do in our profession. And it just goes out again to serve the consumer, which was what the bottom line every one of them was trying to do.
Right, that was their North Star, is what they kept saying. Yeah.
Correct. So I things that went through my head during the podcast and listening to it were several. One was, the average amount of time that a buyer agent spends with the buyer is about 200 hours.
Right.
So if you break that down with our commissions that are generally paid in this arena, in this area too.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes your dollars per hour that you're being paid is quite low.
Yeah.
So, I mean, a lot of the you really have to know what you will be working and doing and the approximate amount of hours that you're going to put into providing services like that. And that's the big disconnect, was what I think they were talking about a lot, is like the consumer, the average home seller and the average home buyer doesn't really understand the amount of time, the back training that we do.
Yeah.
I mean, you all do so much reading, industry training, and all of it that goes into it. It's just not shown.
I think it's also a good point that you made with where you have done that, more of a la carte, like, okay, maybe they can handle this and you make a contract, you're going to do this, I'm just going to do this for you. But I think what happens, and tell me if I'm wrong, a lot of the times is people are like, yeah, I can do it, I'll do that. And then halfway through a transaction, they start to realize, I can't do this. I need some extra help. Never mind, can you come back in and do these other things for me? And when I was listening to the podcast, I was just thinking about like everything that goes into a transaction and how many times, if I was not a realtor and on my own, had no training, there's so many points in a transaction where a mistake can happen.
True.
And I just would hate to see someone go through that and then miss something, and it can really be devastating in a transaction.
Devastating.
Yeah, like, I mean, even just recently when we were going through our transaction with our client and thinking about how, they didn't know that the seller has to give disclosures,
Right.
And I was just
shocking.
And I was thinking, you know, like if they didn't have us there, they would have just not even realized that that was something that they had to give to them. So having, you know, us there at that time, I mean, that's something that we informed them about, and it seems minor now. Like looking back, I'm like, oh, that's just normal in a transaction. But if we weren't there, they would have never known.
They had no idea.
There's so many things like that.
That's the thing. People don't realize how much we do advocate for the consumer.
Yeah.
And that's the job that we do. We're really just there to help people and have a smooth transaction and get the best for the consumer.
Yeah.
But I think based on this podcast as well, I think what heated some of the debate was it makes the realtors look bad. The New York Times article was kind of, I don't know, twisted to make us look like we're trying to scheme.
Yeah.
And that's just not the truth.
Yeah. I think that we have a fiduciary duty to our clients, which is very important, and it's a cornerstone of our industry. Mm-hmm. So we are there to back our clients fully and only take, you know, their interest in a transaction.
Right.
And I don't think she didn't touch on that at all.
No, she glossed over that.
Yeah.
My take on Deborah Kamen and the way she speaks on several of the podcasts is to not be crass to Deborah, but you're exactly right. She didn't touch on the fiduciary duty that we have. She didn't touch on the confidentiality that we have to do, the ethics laws that we agree to abide by as a realtor through NAR and NCAR, since we're in California, and our local associations. There are so many different things that we have to do as professionals too, and they're all geared towards professionalism, and they're all geared toward keeping our clients safe and in the best financial position. And she didn't dive into that at all. It's very complicated what we do, and it isn't really produced out there. And if we had, I mean, that's why it takes, the transaction takes so long, and then the time we spend with our clients.
Yeah.
And people read, but they don't grasp it all. Then we have to reread everything. There's the repetitive nature of producing something that's somewhat of a new item to some people, like a contract for purchase. You know, what are all these civil codes that are inserted into it? Well, we have to know the civil codes in California, which there are many. And in fact, I just went to another training this morning, and we have we went through about 20 new forms that are fantastic. No, they're fantastic. And we're always giving advisories to these people that are buying or that we're selling with. And did you realize that you have to disclose the fire zones, and now they were just redrawn, and what does that mean, and can you insure, and did you do this investigation, did you not do this investigation? I mean, we are knee deep in it, and we live in these communities, and we're going to see these people at the supermarket, so you know, there's many layers to what we do.
That's very true for OI.
I know, in Ventura, I mean, you're running into your clients all the time, and it's like we try to do it right so that their life is great and easygoing, and they're happy. You know, it's an investment. It's huge, and we know that. Well, I want to throw something out.
Go for it.
If you don't mind. I was just re-looking at our data in regard to our local area, Ventura County. We'll just work on that, not Santa Barbara County right now, but I just fresh off the presses was looking at realtor.com. Our median house price in Ventura County is just under $1 million. It's $999,900, and then it cut off the 10 and the zeros. So you know, that's pretty hideous. The income needed to support a purchase like that typically is about just under $400,000. So if you and your partner or the people in the house, it's wild.
Well, I read a data point that was $210,000 is what is required to be a middle class citizen in California. Just one house income. $210,000 just as one person. So it would make sense if you're dual. $400 would be how they would be able to buy a home. But $210 is what is needed to be a middle class citizen in California.
Yeah.
Right.
Brutal.
And that's
Hard out there.
and all
Yeah.
of the economists that they were discussing say it is due to not building housing, our housing
Yeah.
supply. The housing crisis is we're not building housing
Yeah.
of all levels.
Yeah, I think like to that point, that's another reason why what Deborah was saying was just such it almost felt like a slap in the face because it's not, she was blaming it on realtors.
Yeah,
it felt
our
like.
professionals.
And how she was expecting housing prices to go down after this huge settlement. Everyone was so excited,
That was funny.
and that all of this was going to change. And for me, I mean, we had been preparing for this big change for a few years because
Right.
of NextHome and how well they were educating us.
Yeah, James called out get to the brokers. I'm a broker.
Yeah, so
Get your agents trained. You know, they need to know they
That was
need to have
huge.
buyer broker agreements.
Right. So like when it came time and we were prepared for it, it wasn't a shock to me. And so when it happened, personally, I was like, yeah, you know, housing prices maybe they'll dip a little bit, but I was not at all expecting a huge shift in the market. And I was prepared for the changes. And listening to Deborah talk on her, you know, in the New York Times, I was like, oh my gosh, that's what you thought? Like, what? Like,
Really?
Yeah.
No, it was disappointing. I wanted a deeper
Yeah.
dive by her about
Yeah.
it, but it didn't happen. So this podcast with James, I thought, was a much better
Yeah.
discussion.
Yeah.
You know, Keith brought out a lot of great points too, and I don't like to pigeonhole people. And you know, it's an interesting thing. I think overall, the good our profession got out of these lawsuits was that it's making people talk about it. It's making people understand that there are different ways to support a client that wants to sell their house,
Right.
that wants to buy a house. There's just different ways to do it.
I think a lot of times too, when people have these discussions, they talk about the seller's agent a lot.
Yeah.
But I think this change has been most impactful for buyer's agents personally, because it's making buyer's agents have that conversation right when you take them to see their first home. Because we're now, you know, signing buyer broker agreements, and right there, in, you know, plain words, it shows, you know, how much we're offering to work for them, you know?
Right.
So it's making us have that conversation with our clients, and I think it's great.
I do too.
Yeah.
You know what I love is that when this was all breaking news, and I think you might have been there, Riley, there's a very lovely, seasoned listing agent in the area that we were at I was talking to her about, what do you think about the settlement? What do you think, you know, how's that going to work? And, you know, now that we have to always have a buyer broker agreement before we show a house. And she was like, I am going to tell my sellers that they absolutely have to consider giving a compensation to the buyer's agent. She's like, no matter what.
that,
And I mean, she was very adamant. And she was like, I am setting the bar with that because it doesn't make sense. And it is exactly spot on.
Yeah.
Because most of the buyers can't afford to pay out of pocket for their professional representation. So she totally got it.
Especially in a small town like Ojai and Ventura, we do know all the realtors.
Yeah.
Like, they are friends, they are
interesting.
colleagues, they are people we see in our neighborhood or at the grocery store. Like, I meet realtors all the time where I work. And I'm like, oh, you're a realtor too? Nice. I hope to do a transaction with you one day. Like, that's always my response.
That was interesting. What I'm excited to find out is how this is going to work. Like when the market turns, and it's heavily a buyer's market.
Yeah, that would
when
be
it's
interesting.
the buyer has the upper hand and they're like arm wrestling and they're going to like wrestle that seller down onto the ground while they're negotiating. What's that going to look like?
Yeah, I mean, because right now the sellers have all the power, and
they do.
I feel like it's an interesting discussion now, but when that changes, it's going to really change the conversation. Because I mean, it's not always going to be a seller's market, you know.
Could you imagine you've got a house and you need to sell it? Okay, you have a house here in Ventura County. You need to sell the house, and you're interviewing me, and you're thinking, and it's a buyer's market, and you're like, what am I going to do, Jeri, to make my house stand
Entice
out
people,
and
yeah.
entice them? I mean, wouldn't you maybe consider, people are like, I'll leave the furniture. We hear that a lot. Like, the furniture's included, or which isn't part of the.
That's also usually not that enticing.
Yeah, a lot of times it's
Not that enticing.
I'll leave my chickens. No,
That's enticing.
Yeah.
But honestly, I remember people throwing out like trips to Hawaii.
Yeah.
No, I'm not even kidding. This is old
Wild.
stuff. But
Wow.
the sellers might be like, I want you to tell the public that I'm willing to pay.
Yep.
Right.
Whoever is fogging a mirror and brings a valid
Yeah.
buyer, I'm gonna pay.
See, that's.
I think the tune will change.
Yeah,
I
it
do
will.
too.
Yeah.
That brings me joy.
Yeah.
So there's movement in that direction right now because it's a little more of an even market. But I think that's going to be very interesting because then once again, all of the realtors are going to have to adjust and understand that that's okay because
Right.
that's what a seller can do. The seller can say, I'm going to offer out.
It's all right.
It's
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah.
We all have there's little nuances that people need to grasp, and that's kind of why we're here.
Yeah.
To lead these people through.
But it's good to have conversations like this.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, thought that was great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Subscribe and follow.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.